What's up, guys? It's Patricia from tarantulaheaven.com, and welcome to Tarantula Tuesday. I make videos about tarantulas and spiders every single week on Tuesday. And this over here is Miss Spidey. She is currently doing her yoga pancake pose, so I don't think she's gonna move because she just kind of settled down. And if you guys watch my videos quite a bit, you know that Spidey usually is settling down in the videos and not moving. So maybe she'll scooch around a little bit more today, but I think she's going to be in this position for a little bit because she just laid down. And when Spidey lays down and gets comfy, she wants to stay like that for a really long time. But anyway, today's topic is one that I really enjoy because it's one that I've struggled with a lot, and that is how to manage your anxiety when your tarantula is molting. Now, this interests me on many levels. One, because I struggle with anxiety, and also because I know that many of you struggle with anxiety, especially the newer tarantula owners, but also because I am a therapist in the outside world. When I'm not making tarantula videos or doing tarantula research or running my tarantula website, I am a therapist. And so I would like to share a few things that may help. So if you've ever gone through your first tarantula molt, it's a little bit weird. You probably were a little bit stressed out or maybe didn't even know what was happening. I know for me, it took quite a bit to get used to. Spidey's had quite a few molts with me, and I still get a little stressed out every single time. And so for many of us, especially if we have tarantulas who are kind of vulnerable to molts, whether they're really young or really old, it can be stressful every single time. There's always a chance that a molt might not go well. And, the molting process, it's unfortunate that it makes us so anxious because it's actually one of the most beautiful, fascinating processes that tarantulas go through. I mean, not only your tarantula, like being able to watch your tarantula go through the growth process and life cycle stage, but if you've ever watched the molting process in slow motion or any of those time-lapse videos, it is just so crazy and just so foreign from anything that we're used to or what cats and dogs do. So I think it's so cool. It's just a shame that it's so dangerous for them. And in my own experience with tarantula anxiety and molting anxiety, I actually deal with this quite a bit when Spidey molts now because I don't know exactly how old she is because I got her from a pet store who had no idea, and she was already an adult. But I think she's pretty old. Her molts are several years apart now. I think it's been maybe over 2 years since her last molt, and that's pretty normal. Now, since it's been about that time, I imagine she's going to molt again within the next few months, and in her last feeding, she wasn't very interested, so I think that's a sign. But Spidey's a rose hair, and they're infamous for just deciding that they don't want to eat anymore. And she also tends to be a slowpoke when it comes to things like molting or eating and things like that. But I do think that that could be a sign, and it would be around the time that she's got to do it. But the thing is, because of her age, and I do believe that because of her infrequency of molts, that she is kind of elderly, Spidey takes a really long time to molt. I had one of her first long molts. I absolutely freaked out. It was really stressful for me. This molt took at least 12 hours, and I wasn't used to that because when I first got Spidey, she molted in like an hour, and this was very different experience for me to watch, and I don't know why. I mean, those molts were probably only maybe a few years apart, but it seems like it's really changed in every single molt since then, and there's only been like one other molt since then, since it doesn't happen often. But she regularly takes that like 12 to 16 hours now, and it is a little bit stressful. What I think is really stressful about it is that for the first 12 hours or so, it doesn't look like anything's happening. It looks like she's stuck because I haven't seen any movement, and all I do is I try to really intently observe her, because if I really focus, I can see little pulses here and there. I can see that something's happening. And so, part of that is just me having to trust her and trust the process and know that it takes older spiders a long time. So if you're getting anxious about your tarantula's molt, Things like that, knowing that, like, knowledge is really power in these cases, knowing where your tarantula is in their life cycle, because if I didn't know that, I could try to intervene, right? When Spidey's actually having a completely normal molt for an elderly spider. And so if I had intervened, I probably would have interrupted that process and really hurt her and, probably derailed the whole molting process, and she might not have survived. And despite these molts taking a really long time, Spidey always gets through them super well. Knock on wood, but she's never had a bad molt. She is, always got full mobility of the limbs. Everything looks great, fully detached, and fully, beautiful and stunning after her molts. So I keep hoping for that again. But so I say that, I share all of that just to say that knowing those things about your tarantula is very important. And also just knowing that younger and older spiders are at more of a risk for a bad molt. So that kind of allows you to know that you have to be much more careful in that, making sure your tarantula has access to water, making sure that their tank is, good husbandry and things like that, just so that they can have a good molt and you can kind of increase the chances of that. And I think it also helps you know that it also helps you not be so hard on yourself if something does go wrong. There are instances where we've done everything right that we could, and maybe because of age or because they're young, some spiders are just not meant to make it past being a baby. And so that can kind of be comforting, because no matter what we do, just some slings will not make it. And sometimes when it's their time to go, the old spiders won't make it. So sometimes it's not because of you or anything that you did. And so knowledge can be very powerful in that way too. So yes, doing things like, making sure that there's no prey in the tank that could hurt your tarantula, making sure that your tarantula has access to water when they're done, or that the humidity in the tank is good, temperature is good, all of that, no dangerous things in the tank. Because your tarantula is doing like all the heavy lifting for the molt. It takes a lot out of them. I mean, can you imagine if you shed your entire body? And so what we can do while they're doing that is, just make sure that they have everything that they need. And so I'd also like to share a little bit of a technique that we use. And it's not really so much a technique, but more of a reframing that I use in therapy sometimes, and this is part of CBT, which is also called cognitive behavioral therapy. And this kind of framework really looks at certain maladaptive thinking patterns that many of us have. I mean, I think all of us have at least one of them. And it helps us to look at things a little bit differently, perhaps more realistically, perhaps not as distorted. And so what I like to do with some people is look at possibility versus probability. And so this is really thinking about the facts, what would hold up in the court of law. So thinking about statistically that most molts go pretty well. I'm sure that if you have a collection of tarantulas, you can think about, maybe your own spider's healthy molts before that have happened without any problem, or that you've had much more, or that you've had, 50 molts in your collection that have gone without any sort of problem, have gone completely perfectly. I'm sure that if you really added all those up, the times that things have gone right would far outweigh the times where things went wrong. And so we really think about, is it possible that my tarantula may not molt well this time? Yes, it is possible. Anything is possible. And there's always a chance. But is it probable statistically? No. If your tarantula's last molt was perfectly fine and there were no deformities, no issues, and you've been doing all the great husbandry that you guys do for your tarantulas and for that species, there is a much better chance that that molt is going to go okay. Even if it takes a little bit longer than usual, like Miss Spidey over here. So knowledge, and we also covered, what is possible versus what is probable. The next thing that I like to do, and this is also kind of part of, kind of fixing cognitive issues that we might have, is to just be prepared, to bring anxiety down, having an answer for that what if situation, right? So if in the worst case scenario, your tarantula does have a molting problem, it does happen. maybe you can kind of soothe that anxiety by being prepared for that situation. So I know that this happens quite a bit. I see it in tarantula groups a lot, where a molting issue might be happening and then someone's posting in the group about it, what should I do? Or looking up a YouTube video for the first time about that. And you just don't want to end up in that situation or put yourself through that, or your spider, especially if you deal with anxiety. A lot of things that can help anxiety have to do with being prepared and knowledgeable. You know, if you're looking up that information while you're actually in an emergency, the chances are that, you know, we don't do our best thinking or comprehension when we're that anxious. We're kind of like in that fight or flight response, and it's really hard for us to even focus. And so what I would suggest is that you really educate yourself on what to do if this happens beforehand. Maybe this means that you have a checklist right by their enclosures, or that you have an emergency kit full of things like cornstarch or some sort of bonding material, or you have scalpels or things like that that you might actually use, or maybe you have like a little ICU unit prepared, just so that if you do have an emergency, you know what to do and how you're going to deal with it. Maybe you will have identified support people for yourself. So maybe you have a friend who's really experienced with tarantulas who can either come over or walk you through something. Or maybe you know somebody who's really experienced in the tarantula hobby that wouldn't mind you reaching out to them in an emergency. But I think that the best way is to really not rely so much on support people, you know, but for you to have the actual knowledge that you need. So there's a lot of really great resources on YouTube and on the internet. The Tarantula Collective, Tom Moran of Tom's Big Spiders. There's a lot of them. There's so many. And YouTube is a great resource for that. I've definitely put videos out on this before as well about how to handle molting emergencies, so you can totally look that up. But elsewhere on the internet too, and on YouTube, there are a lot of really great tutorials actually, and some step-by-step explanations. And I would totally encourage you to educate yourself about that before you even get into that situation. And this alone can help you feel a lot less nervous, because a lot of what happens with anxiety is just the nonstop what if. And so yes, what if my tarantula has a bad molt? Well, I have a plan. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is to have that positive energy as much as you can. Now, I'm not talking about like toxic positivity, because I don't stand by that. And yes, if your tarantula is having an issue, that is quite stressful and that is really serious. But worrying yourself sick about your tarantula doesn't actually help your tarantula. So what we might want to try to do is, instead of just using that worry to fester and just let that anxiety grow, actually turn that into a plan or action, because that is what will actually help your tarantula in an emergency if you have to do something. And you know, there is no scientific data around this, I don't think yet, but sometimes I will really direct positive thoughts towards Spidey or loved ones, or, you know, say a little prayer, even if you're not that spiritual. And it does help me calm down, which I think helps the animals in the long run, because I'm not, you know, bothering them. I'm not walking around Spidey's tank while she's trying to have peace and quiet. So in the very least, that can at least help you calm down. And I totally did reach out to Spidey's Tumblr community the first time she had a really long molt, and it actually really helped, you know. So sometimes you might just need to, you know, maybe not reach out necessarily for advice or emergency help, but maybe just reaching out for support. You know, I just asked them to send her good wishes as she went through the molt, and just seeing their sweet comments and the way they cheered her on the internet was really, really sweet, and reminded me that I wasn't alone, and helped me direct my anxiety towards, you know, more positive thoughts, and I think behavior that probably made the situation a lot more peaceful for Spidey. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. To kind of summarize, I think knowledge is very powerful. I think that realistically thinking about probability versus possibility is very helpful. I think that being prepared is very helpful. And I also think reaching out for like just emotional support is very helpful. And trying to direct your anxious energy in a more positive direction or plan of action is very, very helpful. I hope that this helps at least one person who might have a little bit of molting anxiety. I know I struggle with it, still do. And let me know if there's anything that helps you, because I think that many of us, you know, even if we're experienced, we know what that feels like the first time, and it's not fun to go through. So let me know in the comments. I look forward to hearing your stories, and I will talk to you later, guys. Take care. Bye.